Welcome to episode 93 of Organizations Win Championships, an Odyssey podcast from Odyssey 2400 Sports. Along with our producer, Spencer Ray, I'm Dan Bernstein, along with Jason Bernstein, and we apparently have two special guests.
I was just going to say.
On the pod today. We can welcome Will Perdue, the four-time NBA champion, and Birdie Perdue is a boxer mix?
No, just a straight-up boxer.
Straight-up boxer.
Female.
Oh, God.
Actually, we had to go to the vet today to get her checkup. She's 5 months old and weighs 30 pounds. Are you going to look at the camera or what?
There we go.
All
Is
right.
she going to fart in the camera too? Because boxers just don't stop.
Yeah, boxers
I tell you what, man,
notoriously.
she, unfortunately, I lost the war on no furniture, no bed. She's now in the bed. And for some reason, she likes to sleep with her butt facing us, as my wife says, and it's a loaded gun.
Yeah, our family, my aunt had boxers, just I don't know, one after the other, and they're great dogs though. They are just terrific.
Yes. Oh, she's very energetic and very fun.
Well, we can say the same about the Chicago Bulls team after perhaps watching them get up and down the floor last night. I don't know how much you had a chance to see whatever this is going to be, but I
took the time to go to so this was my evening last night. I'll break it down for you real quick. You know Paul Sullivan,
of course,
right?
Mm-hmm.
Paul went to the store and he doesn't have DirecTV, so he went to the store and bought an antenna. He apparently was having the same issue that a lot of people are having, where he would only get sound but no picture.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody really seems to have an answer. He called and spoke to somebody at CHSN, and they basically told him, your TV's too old.
Mm-hmm.
And then
did they tell him he's also too old?
Oh my God.
Okay.
I'm not sure it was a Zoom call, but
okay.
But then so he wanted to watch the game, and then of course he reaches out to Casey Johnson, who didn't want to buy the antenna. He fully believes that there's going to be a last-second signing with Xfinity, much like Marquee. So he's holding out, even though he works for CHSN. And we all met at a bar last night and watched the first half together. Now, lo and behold, why all this happens, my wife can pretty much do anything. I'm not really sure why I'm in the picture, but I try to carry my weight.
Mm-hmm.
My wife was at Best Buy earlier yesterday for a work purpose. And she said, hey, while I'm here, do you want me to buy one of these antennas? And I said, yeah, sure. Because I told her, I said, hey, I forgot to mention the game. We always eat dinner together on Tuesday. She goes, oh, go with the fellas. Have dinner. Have a good time. I'll just see you when you get home. I'm like, perfect. She goes ahead and buys the antenna. I'm telling the guys that when I get home, I guarantee you she will have pulled it out of the box and hooked it up, and she'll just be sitting there watching the game with a little sly smile on her face. It wasn't quite that easy. She did connect it, but she had to do a lot of work. And our TV is literally a year old. Had to do a lot of work. And I've never seen somebody so proud to all of a sudden have a picture come up, poof, and my wife walk around the living room like, I did it. I knew I could do it. And she looked at me and she goes, there's some people that they're going to get so pissed off that they're going to be like, screw it. I ain't watching. Because apparently if you have one of these older TVs like Sullivan does, not only do you have to get the antenna, but then you have to buy a separate tuner.
Yep, there's an adapter. It was explained to me it's some MPEG format in which their CHSN is broadcasting, and there's going to be a lot of people who think they have to buy new TVs who may not necessarily have to do so.
So it was that's how I watched the game. So I did watch the first half. Because as
I'm
Billy
sorry.
mentioned,
I'm
the
sorry
starters,
you had to do that.
The starters were not going to play in the second half, but they did play in the third quarter, so he changed his tune during the game. But I did actually see the first half, and then as soon as halftime started, Casey and I wanted to see what they were going to do for halftime. Obviously, they used some prepackaged stuff that they did during media days. So it was about 15 minutes away. He went home, and the person that KC is, he rode his bike. I drove. And by the time I got home, it was about the middle of the third quarter. And by the time my wife figured out the photo and the antenna, it was the fourth quarter. So I watched first, second, and fourth quarters.
And
hey, they won.
But what were your? We should compare notes on what your headline was, what your takeaways from first glance, first blush, looking at some interesting personnel groupings and some new faces and new bodies out there.
I also just wanted to go back to the point that you made about Paul Sullivan. I think that's the first time on this podcast where you weren't the one being made fun of for being old. Okay, so I just
are you talking to me or your dad?
Oh, my dad. My dad, 100%. Not you. You're fine.
Well, he's older than I am, though. He just looks
but you look it, Dad. You're screwed. I'm sorry.
Okay, well,
it's got to be
genes,
it's got to be no. I look like my mom. It's got to be the $20 CVS reading glasses that's doing it for you.
20. That doesn't help.
20.
Were they 20? Is that about right?
3 for 20. 3 for 20.
Oh my God, even worse.
Better believe it. So what's the takeaway? What's the takeaway out of this team from that small sample?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because KC and I were talking about how, if we're going to make it through this season, we really have to adjust our expectations. To me, it was basically, even though there's a lot of different personnel, you still have Kobe, you still have Zach, you still have Vooch. You still have Io, so you could say the core per se is still the same. A lot of the same issues. Perimeter defense, not very good. No rim protection. Struggled to knock down the three. I think they were 4 of 23 in the first half. I don't know where they finished. But take DeMar out of the equation and your best defender, and that's who they are. So I think they kind of lived up to who they are and what they're going to be. When you take out your most reliable scorer and your best perimeter defender, I think what we saw – now, listen, I understand it's the preseason, but at the end of the day – the Cavs offensively, when they took this game seriously, pretty much had their way. So I think that's one of the things that this Bulls team is going to continue to stress is in order for them to win games, which we can talk about that as a totally different conversation, but in order to truly have an opportunity to win games, it's about volume. They got to push the pace. They got to get up shots. They got to out – I would think if that's the case, and let's say, listen, 4 of 23 in the first half was just poor.
Yeah, but the 23 I love.
Exactly. Yes. That's what I was going to say. The pace was great.
But they were
running up and down shooting.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that because one of the things that let's just say that, and I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but let's just say the thought of not a good shot or that word, those 4 words were uttered a lot in the first half. You have to play with pace, but at the same time, your shot quality has to improve dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's so important sometimes you're going to take bad shots, but I would much rather have a bad shot at the rim than have a bad shot from the perimeter.
But if they're going to run there wasn't a lot of half-court setup. It looked to me like people were running lanes, 2 spots, and then it was essentially a 4-out drive, kick, and rotate, reverse, skip, and look for that first good one. It's
right.
I think it's hard to balance the two things of playing with pace and trying to find the best possible shot. At some point, there has to be a compromise and say you're going to take the first good enough shot.
Right. And I think the biggest thing with that is that DeMar DeRozan is gone. He was the guy that would settle everything down, slow everything down. And we know that they have to put up a high volume of shots. I think that it was interesting to not see Giddey set up a half court offense as that often. I feel like that's what I expected him to do coming in, obviously. First preseason game. I don't want to make any judgments about the team yet, even though that's hard to do because we've been doing it all off season. But I do think that Giddey is a really good half court passer. And I think using him, not necessarily, obviously not scoring like DeMar, but him in that same role of saying, okay, we need to slow down a little bit here. Let's set something up because he has great vision. He's a smart player. So I think using Giddey in that role of the pace guy could be really helpful for them. The only issue is that he's also really young and he hasn't been in the NBA that long. And oftentimes they can even be a little bit rushed. And so I just wonder how they're going to use Giddey in the future. And if Lonzo, whatever is going on with Lonzo, if that happens, what happens with a half court offense then?
Listen, to kind of expand on what you said, Jason, I think that I was a little surprised that Giddey was not more aggressive, more assertive in what he was doing. Mm-hmm. I honestly, and this is where you kind of can use the statement that nice guys finish last in this situation. Was the one thing that I took away from media days was when they brought Giddey up and he talked to the media. And I just walked away. I said, listen, man, when you talk about this guy right here, when he talks about the game, he's playing chess. Everybody else is playing checkers. Right? So he knows the game. He understands how to play the game. He sees it different. He's like a professor when it comes to basketball and his knowledge. Okay? I think what he's trying to figure out, because there hasn't been a lot of repetitions, is how do I fit in with this team? Mm-hmm. So, because I haven't been to practice, right? So I don't know, but I have a feeling that there's been a couple times where people have been hit in the back of the head. They've received passes that they weren't ready for because they haven't played with a guy like him. I mean, to me, he's basically just a taller Lonzo Ball. Okay.
I see a little bit of Tony Kukoc in some of his, with his size and his ability to face the basket at that size. I mean, he's not 7
surely
feet
not
tall,
his ability to shoot.
But some of those unexpected offbeat passes that, like you say, you have to be ready for it when you're not used to being ready.
Yeah, because he is. Yeah. I don't want to say he's. I think the best way to say that then, Dan, is that he's unorthodox to mm-hmm. these guys. He's not necessarily fluid. He is an athlete, but he's not necessarily an athletic. He's a little unorthodox because of how he plays. So I think that I almost feel like he played a very conservative game last night, and about almost. And you got to be careful because it's easy to get out there and play with a mindset of I'm not going to make mistakes instead of just playing. Because that was the interesting thing he also talked about in media days is I know I got to do a better job of limiting my turnovers, but sometimes you just got to make passes and let guys know that this can be possible. This mm-hmm. can happen. So I'll be interested to see as each game goes on how he expands and how he becomes comfortable and how he kind of, develops. Basically, I think this is kind of one of those instances where him to fit in, he's kind of had to step back. And then eventually he will step forward and become that butterfly that we all fully expect and become that player that people will then now be walking out of the United Center. Even though the Bulls may have lost, they'll be like, man, did you see some of those passes that Giddey threw? Right. Did you see how the team just hums when he's in the game as these guys have learned how to play with him? And I think that's mm-hmm. going to take some time because he's, like I said, he's a professor. He's a savant. The way he talks about the game is just different than most people.
Yeah, I was also going to mention that going back to his conservative play yesterday, I find it interesting that he was that conservative when it's a preseason game. It's the first preseason game. It doesn't really matter. It's not like he's one of these two-way guys or an Exhibit 10 guy whose roster spot isn't secured. He's going to be on the roster, obviously, and most likely a starter. And I find it interesting that he wasn't almost. I didn't. If he had a lot of turnovers yesterday, I wouldn't have cared because at least he was trying to make plays for his teammates. If there was a pass that he made to somebody cutting to the basket that went off of the recipient's face and went out of bounds, fine. They'll learn how to do that. I would rather him try stuff in preseason games than take a step back. And it almost goes back to when we look at Patrick Williams a little bit, where with Williams, it was a matter of we know he has the talent. We want him to be more aggressive. He plays very conservatively. We'd rather him make mistakes while being aggressive. I don't care if he in the preseason or his rookie year. I don't care if he misses a dunk, but as long as he's making progress, that's what matters, especially for someone who's supposed to be a part of the core. I wouldn't mind if Giddey made a few mistakes in the preseason. That's fine. Or not even mistakes. I wouldn't mind if his teammates weren't ready for his passes in the preseason and it ended up being a turnover. At least I feel like it would get them even more ready for what to expect from.
Well, let me broaden that a little bit as
ahead.
we discuss this, because I think the larger point, and Will, you alluded to this, that they're going to have to outscore people. However many games they're going to win, the defense is in trouble. This
Yes.
defense is in real trouble. There's no rim protector to backstop it. You don't have a healthy Lonzo Ball with being able to contest and be physical on some of the perimeter ball screens. There's the margin for error is so slim that I mean, they'll win games, but they're going to win games 135 to 134. I'm really struggling to see how, and Giddey's a part of the problem too, because he is just not balanced defensively. His angles are bad defensively, and if they're gonna be able to run this thing up and down the floor with him as a full court and half court point guard, my goodness, they're gonna have to hope some guys miss some shots.
Yeah, I will say the one defensive bright spot that I noticed was the rookie. He was real. I would feel. I feel like we're 17 minutes into this episode, around there, because we didn't start recording for 2 minutes. But Modest has some nasty in him. I like Modest, and it's so weird knowing that he's basically my age, but he can play, and his defense on Mitchell and Garland in those few possessions. I know, Dad. I know what you're going to say. He needs to get in the weight room.
Yes,
Dad. I understand. I'm not looking at that. Are the Bulls going to win a championship this year? No. So I just want to see what can he be. Okay. And I was really impressed with his defense.
All right.
I really was, and just how aggressive he was. And I really liked what I saw from him, and I'm looking forward to more.
All right, so let me address that. And hold on a second. I didn't do a very good job with this, so I apologize. So,
get the
it was
dog
kind of rushed.
for you.
I had a conference call that ended, and I appreciate you guys allowing me to, push this back a few minutes. So you were very, very flexible. Thank you for that.
I was able to get a little bit more homework done. You're good. All
right. You do your homework. Sweet. Your dad's not doing it for you.
Damn it.
Modest surprised me. Not because, he's very confident. He plays with a chip on his shoulder. But, I'm not going to sit here and do a breakdown of a guy that played in the G League last year, because the talent it's a step above college, right? So how's he going to do against NBA guys? We saw a particular example of, he did an excellent job of moving his feet, contesting Donovan Mitchell, got a finger on the ball, but yet you can see when he's out there, you can see the smoke coming out of his ears when he's trying to figure things out. but he wasn't the only one as far as poor rotation, lack of help, things of that nature. But I think what we can say is that, at the moment, he's better than average on-ball defender, especially with his length. All right. I think, and I'm going to go back to the Giddey thing to kind of expand on this a little bit. There's a possibility that the most important person, to this organization moving forward might not be a player, but a coach. And because of what you just said, Peter Patton might be the most important individual on this team right now when it comes to who can have the biggest impact on improving Giddey's shot, improving Modest's shot, because if you want examples, look what Kobe's done, and specifically look what Io's done.
Yeah.
Okay, but the one thing I know is Peter Patton doesn't force himself on these guys. He basically lets these guys know, I'm here, I'm a resource. When you're ready, you come to me and we'll work together. It's not like I'm here, you have to work for me. That's not how it works in the NBA. So when these guys start feeling comfortable with Peter Patton and step up and say, hey, I need you to work with me on my shot, my mechanics, whatever it may be, I think you'll see a significant increase in a much better shot than what you saw from Giddey last night, from Matas last night. At least we can say this. It wasn't just the Bulls tossing up air balls. I think, we can honestly say that Cleveland got off to a hot start, and we all were probably sitting there saying, you know what? Cleveland's probably going to get 70 in this first half. Now, they only got 67, but they also threw up some air balls, and I think they were 7 of 27 or something like that at halftime. So neither team really shot the ball well. And I imagine because of training camp, can't be physical fatigue because they only go once a day, but probably some mental fatigue of everything that's being shoved down their throat at the moment in preparation for the season. So how do we look at this team? I think at the end of the day, and this is the hard part for me, we should not look at this team under wins and losses. And I'm just going to admit it. That's difficult for me to swallow, because that's why you play the game, right? You play to win the game. But this is a bigger picture item. This is how are we moving forward? What's the roster going to look like in 6 weeks? What's the roster going to look like in 3 months? What's the roster going to look like next year? And we're literally sitting here asking, who's actually untouchable on this team? And who are they actually building around? You think it's Kobe. You think why would you trade for Giddey and not consider him to be part of the future? You think it's Io, but then you're like, Io's a pretty valuable trade piece. You could get a lot for him. And then on one of these teams that's actually a contender that all of a sudden has to dial 911 and make a trade. And Io's a very easy contract to trade.
Yeah. Not to mention the depth of this upcoming draft. This is not last year, and this is fertile ground. If you really were to push some chips in to try to recoup some of the assets that they've lost in whatever this previous build was, once you've moved on from DeMar and whatever they think Lonzo may be and whatever they're bending over backwards to allow him to try to be is all still, in my opinion, more just blind hope than anything else. I would not be mad if they were able to get multiple first-round draft picks. That'd be great.
And so that's the biggest thing, though, is he stepped up. I do love how they basically are allergic to the word rebuild. They're using the word reshaping
or retool. Yeah.
So, unfortunately, when he says we're reshaping, I have this vision of Ghost when she's on the wheel and she's working with the clay. And I know I'm going way off base here, but I want to give Arturas credit. Okay. They realized what they were doing was not working. Okay. It was fun to watch at times, and some of the stuff was incredible. But at the end of the day, they were still a play-in team. Regardless of how good you thought that team was on paper, it just didn't fit. All right? They literally tried for 3 years to jam a square peg through a round hole. And we actually saw some very entertaining basketball at times. We saw some good basketball at times. But it just, Jason, you joked that, we showed my dog at the beginning, right? And you were cracking about how your dad just, looks old and all this stuff.
Of course.
Blah, blah, blah. And I mentioned, well, we couldn't name the dog Bogey because it's just and you're like, my dad, that's his goal, is to just shoot Bogey.
Yeah. And I mean, no shame, but he sucks at golf.
Yeah. But you strive for consistency, right?
Dad is the Chicago Bulls of golf.
Why do we shoot a 78 one day and an 86 the next? It's just, or you shoot an 89 and then 100, regardless of what level your game at. What we didn't see from the Bulls was just the consistency to build on the big games, right? 2 years ago, they could beat all the top teams, but they couldn't beat the bottom teams. Last year, they struggled against top teams and beat all the teams they were supposed to beat. So, but at the end of the day, I constantly say this, and I think there's some belief of that over there at the Advocate Center, that certain organizations should and could and have to be held to different standards because of their history. And I literally applauded when, he talked about it's not working, we have to make changes. They let DeMar go. They've admitted that they're trying to trade Zach. They're trying to reshape this roster. But what we don't know is into what and how. And that's now kind of what we're waiting to find out. But why we're waiting to find out, we're going to sit here and watch this product and hope that we see individual growth from Giddey, from Io, from Kobe, is it Jalen Smith? Is that right? The guy from Indiana. Mm-hmm. You start asking, okay, maybe we should focus more on individual growth than growth as a team, because we're not even sure who's going to be here in the future.
I mean, Patrick just signed that deal, but I mean, that is also relatively friendly.
And I apologize. Sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
And Patrick Williams. I mean, regardless of what people say, his contract is still very favorable as a trade piece.
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
I know this for a fact. There are a lot of teams that like him, and a lot of teams that would trade for him. Okay. It would have to be a favorable trade for them, meaning the other team. But I know there's a lot of fans out there that, this guy sucks. They can't trade him. He's shown enough. And Dan, you know this. Potential is what gets general managers fired, but potential is what general managers will trade for.
Well, and the physicality, the certainties of what you get with Patrick Williams, he's smart, he's nice, he's professional, he is also 6'8", 240. And could theoretically guard multiple positions.
And he can shoot. And he's
he's a 40% 3-point shooter.
Yeah.
The question is, do you trust, if you're trading for him, do you trust that you can flip that switch, that you can find whatever the on switch is, that he'll go?
Right.
And people think they can. I mean, there's always a team and always a coach and always a team that says, like, look, we can unlock that.
Right. And we talked about this multiple times, how we sometimes wish we could just take Javonte Green's brain and plant it in his body, or at least his motor, because the GOAT. But we know that all Javonte Green does is go. He never stops. He guards hard. He rebounds hard. He dunks everything. And he actually shot the ball okay for the Bulls last season. So I'm excited to see him here in New Orleans, but I think that's a big part of it. And I think some of that we have again in a player we haven't mentioned yet. I like I like Julian Phillips. I liked him since last year when I saw him in the G League. I liked when he came up to the NBA level and had some opportunities. I would like to see more from him. It looked like he gained a little weight, but he didn't lose any bounce. And he's aggressive. He's still young. He came out as a freshman out of Tennessee. So he's what, 20 years old?
So from
is that right?
2021 minutes. If you want to play Julian Phillips more, especially if they're going to go in smaller lineups.
Hell yeah.
Which they did last night.
From whom would he take minutes if he really gets going?
If you're playing a small lineup, would it be Vucevic?
I'm asking.
I mean,
because
if you're playing a small lineup,
they had I think they had Pat. Pat was technically. Listen, let me back up for a second and just say one thing. Unfortunately for Patrick, because of who he was guarding, he was set up for failure last night.
Oh, that dude is a monster.
That's just, when the game started and I saw, my point is that Cleveland took advantage of the best mismatch on the floor. And that mismatch was, I apologize, all of a sudden I drew a blank. The big kid that Patrick Williams was guarding. They basically just gave him the ball and let him go
Mobley?
right at Patrick.
Eric Mobley.
Yeah.
Evan Mobley.
Sorry.
Evan, yeah.
Sorry.
I think that kid's going to be an all-star this year.
I thought he looked like Giannis out there. He looked like he was playing a JV team. And I texted him last night and I said, this dude looks really good. He just looked, I don't know why. He's always been lengthy, but he just looked long.
6'11".
Yeah, but his arms looked like Giannis out there. He didn't make any threes, but he can do that. I am scared of that guy. If he can take it to the next level and become like not just I think he came second rookie of the year voting behind Scotty Barnes. And obviously he's been very solid since then. But if he can become like a legitimate all-star and with Garland and Mitchell,
he's got the tools to do.
If look out for that team if he can really do that. And you forget about Max Strus. My God.
But the point is that he was set up for failure last night, and I feel bad for him. So I'm going to give him a pass on that game. He did not play well. I think he unfortunately, when you have to guard a guy that size, and when I say size, I mean length, like you just mentioned, Jason, but that mobility, that's just not fair, okay? So he kind of was set up for failure. But to me, that kind of goes to one of the problems that this team had last year. It's obviously going to have this year is, okay, where was the help coming from? How was the help coming? When it came too late, came from the wrong spot. So there's a lot of work to be done. Now, that being said, you got the Memphis Grizzlies coming in on Saturday. I fully expect and want, and I will be at that game, to see a different Patrick Williams. It has to happen. We're now, as I said, we've taken a step back. We're now evaluating these guys on what they can do for this organization moving forward. Okay, we know what the expectations are. We've seen bits and pieces. We've been teased numerous times on what his potential is. But can he consistently do it every night? And instead of doing it 1 out of 10, can he do it 4 out of 6? And that's what we're waiting for.
Well, before we move on to the trivia showdown, which is always the highlight of the show, I want to talk a little bit about something that you said about when you wanted to applaud the front office for understanding this build didn't work. This wasn't getting them where they wanted. The reason this podcast is called Organizations Win Championships is because of what Jerry Krause said famously, that was, of course, misinterpreted by so many people for their own purposes.
Including the guy on the poster behind me.
it's always the idea of having the championship in top of mind, and I always thought that was an important role that you've played as a Bulls broadcaster and a multiple NBA champion, of holding them to that standard. Say, what are we talking about here? What are we doing? What is the goal of all of this? It's not just to entertain 23,000 people every night and say, oh, what a fun show, and Benny threw his popcorn. It is ultimately to have a parade and to have those trophies and be proud of the trophies that are at the Advocate Center right now.
Guys studying too much.
We had mentioned that the Bulls broadcast, you always had brought that sense of a championship standard. So as the broadcast is itself remodeling, I just want to catch us up on what you're going to be doing, where you're going to be doing it, where we're going to be able to see and hear you as this is all going on.
So I am officially now with CHGO on their, and not full-time, mostly home games, because they kind of like the format of having 3 guys on set. So for the home games, Gottlieb will obviously be at the United Center. So that's when I kind of step in the studio, because Gottlieb, with CHGO really doesn't travel. I will occasionally, like, he'll go to Milwaukee, like, next Monday they're playing in Milwaukee in a preseason game. I'll be in the studio for that. But, it's a situation to where I'm going to take that to CHGO. It's a little more relaxed. Still try to do exactly the same thing. It's funny you mentioned that, Dan. I mean, I was told that occasionally CHSN, I know all these letters get confusing, but Chicago Sports Network will occasionally have me on in the third chair as a guest analyst periodically.
Good.
But, I'll still kind of be in the picture when it comes to, analyzing the Bulls, just in a different format with CHGO, and that's, on YouTube. But you're exactly right. And, it's kind of interesting. I know Jerry Reinsdorf catches a lot of heat as well. But when I first took this gig with, I think back then it was called Comcast Sportsnet, when I first started. When I took this gig, I sat down with Jerry, because now I'd already worked for ESPN. I'd already worked for the SEC network, but I worked for a network, not for a particular team per se, right? I asked him about how I should go about doing this, because I understand that, okay, I technically work for Comcast Sportsnet, but the way that ownership was divided up, 20% was owned by the White Sox, 20% by the Bulls, 20% by the Blackhawks, and 20% by NBC Universal, right? So technically, Jerry Reinsdorf owned 40%. And then even the same when it changed over to NBC Sports Chicago, same thing. And he just said, listen, you need to be honest and not be a homer, because the Chicago sports fan is just too smart for that. They'll see right through it. And eventually they'll tune you out, because they'll be like, he's a homer. You can't believe what he says. And I can honestly say, and all the time that I was at basically NBC Sports Chicago as an analyst for the pre-half and post, I got an email from Jerry one time. And his only complaint was, you're not a doctor, so please don't question our medical staff when it comes to decisions that are made with the player's health. That's all he ever said. And of course, being the smart ass I was, I fired back, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. I'm not sure he thought that was too funny. But that's it. Otherwise, I would occasionally, when I go to White Sox games, I'll sit in the box with him and ask him about what he thought about this, that, or the other. Never had a complaint. He just said that you're doing a good job. You're being honest to the fan, because that's why they're watching. What is Will Perdue, a former player, a former champion for both two organizations, played under Pop, played under Phil, what does he have to say? How is he looking at this? How is he breaking it down? What does this mean to him? And I took that seriously because, anybody that knows me, my wife I videotaped every game that or every show I ever did, and I would go back and watch it and analyze it. What did I say? How did I say it? Did I like what I said? I would ask my wife for advice. What do you think about that? She says, do this, do that, whatever. So I always took that very seriously because I thought, yes, it was a form of entertainment, but I thought it was a way to really help the fan who watched the show try to get into the mind of Billy, of Fred Hoiberg, of the player, to kind of really get a sense of what it was they were really looking at, instead of just, hey, I follow the ball, I watch basketball, I don't know why things happen that way. I kind of left hoping that I provided the viewer with something that they were, the old saying is, they could provide some information around the water cooler that the other guys couldn't because they watched the post-game show or the pre-game show.
No question. And happy to hear that you're still going to be actively involved, and know that you always have a standing invite here whenever you want to pop on. We do something at the end of our show called the Trivia Showdown. It started as the College Showdown, and we would quiz each other about who went to what college. And then we started
I started kicking your ass progressively, you decided to switch it.
No, we ran out of guys is what happened. We just ran out of
I
players.
was kicking your ass.
And they're not mutually exclusive. Yes, you were kicking my ass, and we ran out of guys. So we broadened everything. So we're going to start this special one out by presenting Will Perdue in the show. Are we going to play the music, Spence? We got to have the music.
Are we playing the music?
All right. It's not the showdown until we have the music. So I've prepared.
Did your dad pick this music out?
No, our previous producer, James Jackson, actually picked the music out. That was
okay.
we give him credit for that. Jason and I have each prepared a question for you specifically.
Okay.
So now I will be disappointed if you don't know one of these, but I think you'll know all of them. Name the 4 former Vanderbilt Commodore men's basketball players who have played for the Chicago Bulls.
Now, does that include me?
Yes.
Okay, so
that's
me,
one.
Charles Davis. Does Summer League count?
No.
Okay. Because Barry Goheen played on the Summer League team
Barry Goheen. We used with the curly hair, right?
That's right.
Yeah, I remember him.
The lefty that actually in his 4-year career hit 6 game-winning shots. Hold on a second.
You got 2. One is kind of a trick question.
Of course it is.
But one was recent.
Luke Cornett.
Luke Cornett is 3. Now, the last one only played 1 year at Vanderbilt before transferring to
he transferred. I can't remember his name.
He transferred to a similarly elite academic university. He ended up graduating from Penn, and he played for the Bulls. Matt Maloney.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Matt Maloney, those are the only 4.
And Maloney actually played with me.
He did?
When he came, remember, I think he played did he not play for the Bulls when B.J. Armstrong and I came back?
I don't think so. I thought he was there in like 2002 or...
Weren't B.J. and I there in 2000?
He might have been.
Let me look this up. Matt Maloney played from 97 to 03. Played for the Bulls in 1999 and 2000. That season, BJ was there, and so were you.
This is where now I'm starting to get old and I'm forgetting. We used to say this about Tex Winter all the time. That guy's a genius, but unfortunately, he's forgotten more than you'll ever know. But I'm starting to forget stuff. Now that you bring that up, I can specifically remember me, Matt Maloney. There were 2 other guys, but we had dinner And he told me that because I didn't even though we were playing together, I didn't even know he went to Vanderbilt for a year. And he looked at me and he goes, "You don't even remember I was at Vanderbilt." And I was like, "You were?" And he told me about that. And I was like, "Yeah, man, you must have not really played a lot." But usually, you remember those guys that play from Vanderbilt because there's not a lot of them. But there are guys that played from Vanderbilt. I will say this. Matt Maloney, if you could take his brain and put his brain in Patrick Williams' body, Pete Will would be an all-star.
This is the second Patrick Williams coagula get out procedure that we've had on the show today. That
right.
might be a new record.
So if we could somehow use half of Javonte Green and then half of Matt Maloney and put that in there to Patrick Williams.
Because the one thing about Matt Maloney was, you obviously pointed out, Jason, he didn't have a long career. And probably the best years of his career were in Houston with the Rockets. Because I think he ended up starting some games down there because of injury. But just, you talk about a guy that played his ass off, that had no fear, and that had a huge chip on his shoulder. And just, as he said, "I don't give a shit. I'm just here to play basketball, man. Roll the ball out. Let's play." He was, to me, he was the prototypical point guard that would be perfect for an under-talented, undermanned second unit that would put them in a position to where they could actually believe that they could play better than when, you kind of unfortunately get matched up against the starters.
So like a TJ McConnell.
I was just going to say TJ McConnell. You're describing TJ McConnell. Yep.
All right,
Jason,
so
you have a similar question, right?
Let's keep this Vandy train rolling. I know it's hard to talk about Vanderbilt and not talk about that football game. Just want to mention it. Holy shit.
I thought you were going to talk about the 3 innings and no earned runs you pitched.
Oh yeah. That's right. Because their club baseball team had no chance against my slider. But let's keep this up. The chirps that game were insane, back and forth, because they were just saying, "You guys are all Vandy rejects," and we were just saying, "You guys have no football team," and that really aged well. But oops. We didn't lose to them. It was the same day that they almost beat Missouri. But although they look terrible as well. So my question is, you were the first Vanderbilt Commodore to win an NBA championship, let alone 4 of them. Can you name the 3 other Vandy guys to win an NBA title? And they're all relatively recent.
Well, Festus Ezeli.
Bang. That's 1.
Luke Cornett.
2.
And I know this. Hold on.
Yeah, this is the hardest one.
So I'm going to get 2 out of 3 on this one, and I'm drawing a blank.
It is.
If I had plenty of time, but obviously I don't. So
it's Damian Jones from the Golden State Warriors and played for Cleveland. I don't know. Is he still on Cleveland? I think he might be. Wonder if he played last night. That would have been.
No, he did not. I did not see him. Okay. I don't think he's still on their roster. But
yeah, he played for Sacramento, Phoenix, and
he's kind of bounced around the league a little bit.
Yeah. So that was my trivia question, and there
it is.
All right, so. Can you guys do something for me?
Sure.
What's up?
Can you both turn to your right?
To my right.
All right. Yeah. Are you trying to get our side profiles?
Uh-oh.
Has anybody ever told you look just like your dad?
I think thing is that I have the same profile as both of my parents.
Yeah.
Because both of them have the big Jewish.
Yeah.
No. Your dad mentioned that, you're screwed, son, because you look like me. And you said, no, I look like my mother. And I'm like, whoa.
He looks like his mother's father is who he looks like. Because we have pictures of him when he was the same age, and it's uncanny.
Yeah, but look, if you look right now,
I know
this is weird, but
we both have the nose, yes.
No, but it's not even the nose. It's the chin, the cheekbones. I mean, I sound like Jerry Seinfeld and George Costanza right now, because it's just like you're like, they remember in that show when they felt uncomfortable, like he's Jerry, like Kramer was like, he's an attractive man. Come on.
Well,
I
he
just
is.
no.
I just thanks, but I just remember the first time I met Bill Wennington. I think it was against Cleveland opening night a couple of years ago. So that was what, the 2022-23 season. So after the really good Lonzo Ball year.
Mm-hmm.
And you were doing a show from there or something, and I was there. You were talking with Bill. Bill walks up to me, shakes my hand, and goes, "Thank God you look like your mother." Like, that's the first thing that comes out of his mouth.
Yep.
Not nice to meet you.
No,
It was just
first thing he said to him.
First thing he said.
So I know we need to run this. We need to be done here, but I did have one question that I wanted to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I want to preface this question by saying that I've been very fortunate to actually work with your father on numerous occasions at 670.
Okay.
I love the fact that he can go back and tell numerous CBA stories.
Oh my God. Yeah. That's
so
my
I
whole life.
don't think people, I preface it, but I also want to set it up this way. I don't think people really understand how well your dad understands basketball. Okay. So that's more of a, hey, I want to throw a compliment out there so the viewers that not only watch this podcast, but listen to the show kind of get a better understanding of who he is. But I also wanted to ask him this question because I've never asked this question because I thought maybe he might be offended. But I think that this is a situation with, you being here and giving your dad a hard time that I think is the perfect time to ask.
All right.
I'm just curious I'm asking this question because he's not. And maybe this is like, maybe this is his shtick.
Okay.
But I'm curious why he comes across on radio as the grumpy old man.
I'm working on it.
You haven't been doing a great job as of 3 weeks ago. But let's forget about that.
Because my point is that like you can be listening and turn the radio on and not know what's being talked about, but then all of a sudden that at some point this is because of the perkiness in his voice. They're talking about fishing.
Yeah, because the audience loves that. Yeah, nothing gets them going like that.
I just remember that time there was like a production that you, Kevin, and Shane did when you caught up a black drum and Shane cooked it up and Kevin put it on the score.
Yep.
You decided to explain for 10 minutes about the type of line you were using and what lure you were using, and Kevin just did not care. And he put a caption saying like old man fishing stuff and put it at 100 times speed so you couldn't hear a single word.
It said something like
Nobody cares.
No idea what
so
bro is talking about. Yep. Well, hey.
God.
Once we get into basketball season, that's when everything starts to get fun. If I can have, if this Bulls team can bring me an iota.
Hold on, you didn't answer the question.
The question is why be the grumpy old man?
Well, you're not. But a lot of times on air, you come across as the grumpy old man.
Well, because your children make you miserable. You know this.
So much.
That everything.
I'm not even here.
Everything in life would be fine if you didn't have to constantly worry about your screw up kids. So it's clearly his fault.
It's clearly my fault. You're the one that's always asking, have you gotten any grades today? Have you gotten any grades today? Have you done this, that? Jeez.
Yeah, have you gotten the credential for the Pelicans Bulls game?
Dad, I'm waiting on a response. I should be good to go. My God, here we go again.
All right.
But here's the thing. This is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Because at the end of the day, whether you want to believe this or not, Jason, your dad is just like any other father. Because at the end of the day, he wants what's best for you. And as hard as he tries, and I do the same thing to my son all the time, as hard as we try to bite our lip and be like, all right, let's let him figure it out himself, let him make a mistake, there's a part of us that just can't. because we're trying to help you understand and grasp the importance. And then you realize, well, what I consider to be a priority, they don't consider to be a priority. But if they're really going to be successful outside of college, not in college, outside of college, they need to recognize this now. I mean, now, damn it, right now.
Preach.
Even
Yeah,
now,
but Dad, I
even
guarantee you
though-
he does it in a way that's less of a dick.
I guarantee you his son doesn't agree with that.
No, but even though I was going to say, even though it won't be relevant for 6 years, you need to know it now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And even though
I almost
my
feel
wife
like
will
saying
tell
yes,
me-
Dad, even though it's not my dad speaking. Like, I just feel like I'm getting lectured right now. I had a couple of classes
get off
earlier.
the
I feel like
phone.
this is my third lesson of the day. Oh,
I'll
you
get
might
off
have
the
a quiz
phone
on
and
this
my
too.
wife will be next to me, and even though she's not his mother, his stepmother, she'll be like, "Yeah, that he didn't listen." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I think he shut you out after about minute 2, and you talked for 12 minutes.
Got to do it anyway. You got to do it anyway. Look, as my great grandmother used to say, parenting is a life sentence.
And Jason, I promise you, this is comes from my heart. Every dad out there, even though every kid thinks their dad can't wait to say these words, the last 3 or the last 4 words that we ever want to say as a parent is "I told you so." We'd rather not have to say it.
He seems like he enjoys it sometimes, though.
I guarantee you, my son would say the exact same thing when it is painful to say those words.
Well, he's part of
when
the
we
Screen
say
Actors
those
Guild,
words,
so
we're
maybe
just like-
it's that side coming out of him.
No,
What's that?
I would say that
He's part of the Screen Actors Guild, so maybe it's him acting that he's pleased.
No,
Maybe I've been
there's
fooled.
I'd say 4 words that for me would be the equivalent of that. I'm disappointed in you.
Oh, thanks.
That I'm saying
I've gotten that
those
in a little while, actually.
those are the ones you never want to say.
Knock on
Those
wood,
are
but
the ones.
I've been okay recently.
You've been doing very well. So with
But
that,
that's also as another father, to me, I'd rather hear those words when I screw up than not hear them at all, because all it tells me is your dad truly cares.
It cares, yeah.
matters.
Yeah.
And Will, like I say, standing invite, whatever you want. Appreciate so much you taking all this time to join us today, and good luck with the new endeavor.
Well, continued luck with your podcast and your organization, and then I appreciate the time. I really enjoyed it, and looking forward to the comments once this is out there.
Oh,
yeah.
I'll
I'll also give you a follow on Instagram so I can tag you when this episode goes up, because I usually do an Instagram story.
Outstanding.
So, perfect.
All right. That is Will Perdue, the former Bull, 4-time NBA champ. And Jason, what I think we need to do, I'm just gonna do the crowd question. I think we can save our individual showdown questions for next week, because
this is
we're
by
up
a
against
mile the
time-wise.
longest episode we've done.
So I just want to congratulate last week's crowd winner, Andy. It's our first 2-time winner of the crowd question. He got it right. And he also had a question for you, Jason, because you asked the question to you, who was the first German player drafted by the Bulls? And he got it right by naming Paul Zipser. But he also said, technically, because Dalibor Bagaric was born in Germany, that he said by a technicality, he said he could have answered Dalibor Bagaric, but
but would that make Kyrie Irving Australian?
Yeah, probably.
Does Kyrie Irving have Australian citizenship?
Yeah. Yeah, he could play for them if he wants. Yes, absolutely he does. We did that as a question, remember? All right, so here's the crowd question.
Okay, go ahead.
Here's the crowd question. This is for you, and just send it at Dan_Bernstein on Twitter, or at Jason.Bernstein_ on Instagram. On the 1987 All Big East first team,
oh my,
there were 6 players because of a tie. Instead of 5, there were 6. I will give you, and the reason I looked at this, Billy Donovan of Providence was on that team. First team All Big East 1987, Billy Donovan. Everyone on that team played in the NBA. Some more than others, but including Billy Donovan. And I looked at win shares. Who on that team was the most productive NBA player.
So it's a two-parter. Interesting.
And it's no, it's not even close. No, that's the question.
Oh,
the question is on
naming everyone. It's just
no.
who.
Okay. On I mean, because a lot of people can name one or two or three, but on the 1987 Billy Donovan All Big East first team, who was the best of all of them, they all were NBA players. Who was the best NBA player by win shares?
Okay, interesting.
There you go. There you have it.
Right.
And that's going to do it for us. That was really fun.
So
that was
fun. That was
like, subscribe, download, rate, do all the things that you're supposed to do. And we will get back with you next time. Thanks to our producer, Spencer Ray. Thanks to Will Perdue for joining us. And that is episode 93.